Alright, how's it going everybody? My name is Infamous Isaac and I'm here with a video on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6, Stone Ocean, the 6th installment in the JoJo's anthology. And I want to say immediately that this isn't a blind review. I'm going to give a spoiler-free and a spoiler review for this, but I know what happens in it from the manga because that was what I read first. So I was definitely excited to get into this and see if I still feel the same way I did when I finished it in the manga. And after having finished it, spent all of July basically watching it, partly because I've been doing other stuff and also because I've just been lazy. I finished it, it's July 31st, it took all of this month to watch it, and now I'm going to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's get into the non-spoilers for Stone Ocean. Ah, this is so hard, I can't wait. So, whether you have watched part 1 through 5 and haven't watched part 6, or you just haven't watched anything on JoJo's, I'm going to give you a non spoiler review for it. So, for me personally, I haven't talked about JoJo's much on the channel at all. I made a video back in like December of 2022 talking about it. That video detailed how I watched part 1 through 5 and read part 6 through 8 because part 9 wasn't out yet and part 6 was out, I just hadn't watched it at the time. And JoJo's is something surprisingly that I didn't talk about much on the channel besides that. Like there's just certain things that I've watched that I've read that I could talk about on the channel, but I just never did because either I forgot or I never thought that they would be good enough to be videos. And with part 6, I had an overwhelmingly positive opinion on it. It's not my favorite part, that goes to part 8, but part 6 was definitely one of my favorites. Definitely top 3 for sure. And so when we heard it was being animated, it was like, all right, bet. I can't wait to see other people be introduced to part 6 and the great characters and story that it has to share. So now with the time between me having read the manga back in like 2019, 2020, and then me having watched the show now in like July of this year, I can say that this part is an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. I love part 6 still to this day. The characters are great, the setting is amazing, the story is honestly one of the best in JoJo's period, at least in my opinion, and the fights can be really, really good to some of the best in the series, but can also be dog water. But the fights that I know are dog water range like from 2 to 3 at most, if I remember correctly. The rest of them I think are good or amazing. I only have positive things to say about part 6, and if you haven't watched part 6 and you've watched the other parts, or if you haven't watched anything on JoJo's, I recommend catching up to it. For me, just for this part, because this part is really the culmination of everything, and I love it for that, you know? And I'm not trying to spoil as to why that is, but if you watch JoJo's and you get to part 6, it'll make sense. And the ending for this part is honestly the best in all of JoJo's. I can't recommend it enough to people. And let me know down below if you agree or disagree with me, because I know the opinions on part 6 have been divisive for like a long time. And I don't know what they are now ever since part 6 animated finished, you know? So let me know down below. But that's my spoiler free opinion on part 6. Now we move on to the spoilers. If you haven't watched part 6 and don't want to be spoiled, do not watch this video. If you don't care and you want to hear my opinion, then by all means go ahead. But please do not watch this if you are uninitiated. Without further ado, let's begin. So the story starts off with our introduction to Jolene Cujo, who is Jotaro Kujo's daughter, right? And she's part 6's protagonist while Jotaro's part 3's protagonist. And so we get introduced to her by seeing her thrown into jail, right? And the reason for that is because her and her ex-boyfriend Romeo got caught in like a car accident where they hit somebody. And so they had to dispose of the body. At least that was Romeo's suggestion, right? And Jolene took the fall for it because Romeo was begging her to do so, right? And so when she was being put on trial, her attorney was just like, yo, take a plea deal. We could reduce the sentence as much as we can if you do that. And so she's like, all right, I'll trust my attorney. You sound smart. And so when she does that, the judge is like, oh, so you admit you're guilty? All right, let's give you a max sentence. And so Jolene's just like rightfully mad, like, what happened? I thought they were going to reduce the sentence. And then the attorney, we find out, was actually in league with Romeo's family to make sure that Jolene took all the blame for it and Romeo's future was still intact because he's rich. So while on the bus, Jolene meets Hermes Costello, where she's going to be an important character, so remember her. And then she gets left off at Green Dolphin Street Prison after helping Hermes when she was getting assaulted. She learns about her new stand, Stone Free. And so if you're an anime only or a manga only, you're going to realize that the stand names are always different between the two. And the reason for that is because of localization and copyright reasons, right? because each stand is named after a musician or a song name or a band or stuff like that after like part three, because part three was just the tarot cards. And so they can't have that in shows, so they have to change them. So Stone Free gets turned into Stone Ocean, stuff like that. And now this is where Jolene's journey truly begins. So as Jolene gets acclimated with the prison culture, we meet her roommate who's Gwess, and she has Goo Goo dolls as a stand, and it basically just turns people smaller. And this causes Jolene trouble, but it's only like one episode, so Jolene manages to handle it. And Jolene, after that whole stand battle ordeal, hates Gwess completely. But we later on see them grow closer and closer, so I kind of like Gwess. She's kind of cool. Each part has their own way of handling Stan, so this fight serves as a reintroduction to that. But I like it, I thought Gwess was cool. It wasn't a crazy fight, but it definitely wasn't one of the worst. I'd say it's like in the middle of the pack for sure. But next we have John Gallier. And so the reason why this fight happens is because Jolene gets a call from Jotaro, like, yo, I'm gonna visit you and I have stuff to tell you. So Jolene and him are talking in the visitation room, and this is where Jolene actually meets Emporio in like a little trash can. So what I didn't explain about Emporio is that he is an important character. He is here to help out Jolene, and he lives in the prison. He does have a stand, it's called Burn Down the House, and I'll explain more of that later. But Jolene and Jotaro are talking, and Jolene hates her dad, right? Because he's never there. He's just always away on trips doing work and all that, so it just left Jolene and her mom, right? And Jolene became angsty and became a criminal because of it. Granted, she was framed for this act. She did have a prior where she stole somebody's car and she got arrested for it as a juvenile, right? So Jotaro was talking to her and everything, and he's just like, yo, listen, stands are real. We gotta get you out of prison. Something is going on here. But Jolene's just like, no, I don't want to go with you and all that. But then we get introduced to John Golly's stand, Manhattan Transfer, and all that. And so this whole battle goes on in the visitation room. But what I love about John Golly's fight is that there's more to it than meets the eye. Because once Jolene thinks that she's beaten John Golly, they wake up. So when Jolene wakes up still in the visitation room, the room is just like a complete mess. The guard is still knocked out. The room looks like full of semen. It's disgusting. And Jotaro's still knocked out, right? And so what we learn is that John Golly's stand is just, it can sense the sensitivity in the air with this little stand guy. And he can use that because he's a sniper, so he's blind. The person who knocked him out was White Snake, and we'll learn more about them later on. So they get out of the room and they're about to escape. But there's another person, there's another headmaster at play. So something comes out of Jotaro, and it's a disc apparently, and this is what we assume to be White Snake's power, right? And he takes out Star Platinum, and he takes out Jotaro's memory. He basically leaves him incapacitated, almost dead in a vegetative state. So now Jolene has to leave Jotaro with the Speedwagon Foundation while she goes back into prison and has her sentence extended because of her attempted escape attempt. So as we cut away from Jolene and we go to Hermes Costello, we see her first stand fight, right? And she fights Thunder McQueen, aka his stand being Highway to Hell. And Hermes, she unlocks her stand, it's called Kiss. In the anime it's called Spec, but it's basically the same thing, so it doesn't matter. Highway to Hell being a stand where if the user inflicts any damage to himself, it affects the person they're attacking, right? And so Hermes managed to beat him pretty convincingly, fighting her own way to deflect that damage. And now that fight is over and we move on to Jolene and Hermes getting together, right? So Hermes and Jolene volunteer with 4 other people to find 2 escaped male prisoners, and they go out into the Florida wetlands near the prison to find where they are, right? But they use this opportunity to talk about their game plan, how they're going to handle White Snake, the disc, and how they're going to, get together and basically become friends, right? And so while they're doing that, they find out that the guard that was supposed to be watching over them died, right? And so now it's a game of imposter of who killed the guard and who's really here with us, right? Because they're missing one person. And so what we come to find out is that it's a stand at play. It's algae, and the algae is called Foo Fighters. And they were employed by White Snake to protect one of Jotaro's discs. And Jolene last second has a change of heart. She understands that Foo Fighters was just employed by White Snake. It doesn't mean that she's inherently evil. So she's like, yo, listen, instead of working for White Snake, why don't you work with us, as friends instead of just a subordinate? And then she's like, sure, why not? Even though she killed a couple prisoners. She takes over one of their bodies, and now she's Foo Fighters FF, whatever you want to call her. So after the Foo Fighters fight in the wetlands, they go back to the prison, and now they're just chilling, right? It's just the 3 of them booling. And so we learn about this new person called Mirashon, right? She's a stand user, and she's employed by Father Pucci. And her stand is Marilyn Manson, who's a debt collector, right? And Father Pucci, we learn, is actually White Snake's owner, their master. And Pucci just spends a lot of time in this prison, but now that Jolene is his enemy, he's gonna try to kill her because he has other plans, right? And so Mirashone is in the courtyard with Jolene, Hermes, and Foo Fighters, and she makes a deal, right? And Marilyn Manson, it's basically if you make a deal, you have to pay up somehow. They have to set the grounds of like how much are you gonna get in return and how much you have to give up if you lose, right? And the whole fight basically boils down to finding ways to beat Mirashone with the game of catch that they were playing, which they managed to do, and overall it's a really cool and creative fight. But after that's done, we move on to the next fight, which is Operation Savage Garden. So with Operation Savage Garden, we begin with Jolene calling the Speedwagon Foundation from Green Dolphin Street Prison, right? And they basically come up with a plan that in 20 minutes, Jolene has to be outside in the courtyard by any means necessary if she wants to give that disc over to the foundation. And so she makes her way over there, but Emporio gets her into his room, and he's basically like, yo, if you're gonna leave, take Weather with you. And this dude, he's next to Anastasia, and Weather is he's just a calm guy. He doesn't have his memory, so he can't really talk much, but he does talk. And so while those two are heading over there, they get attacked by Lang Wrangler, aka Jumping Jack Flash, right? And this fight is basically he controls gravity in certain ways, and so they have to find creative ways of dealing with the lack of oxygen because of that. And it's just a really cool and creative fight. And for Operation Savage Garden, it just makes it even better. So once they manage to beat Lang Wrangler, Pucci shows up, and this is just all but confirmation like, yeah, this guy is White Snake's owner, you know? So Pucci lets Jolene go because he caught her, but to remain anonymous, he plays coy, right? So she doesn't find out. And so once she gets out to the courtyard, she gets shot by a prisoner who was hired by Pucci, right? And so weather makes it so poison dart frogs start raining from the sky because this is a weather phenomenon, right? And his stand ability makes it so he can control weather. And so after everything's finished and all that's done, Jolene protected herself with her stone free. And so a carrier pigeon shows up and takes the disc from Jolene. She knows, like, yeah, this is the Speedwagon Foundation. And so it leaves, now leaving Jolene to be whisked away into solitary confinement because of her escape attempt. And now we move on to Hermes and her story. And her story being her going to kill Sports Max, who was a guy that killed her sister. And it was just a bunch of like gangster stuff involved. Gloria was an innocent girl, and Hermes ran out on her because it was just too much for her to handle right now with her life being so difficult. And so when Sports Max killed her, she swore that she would go and kill him, whether it took her going to Green Dolphin Street Prison or not. And so she went there, she killed him, and now his stand is basically he takes anything that was dead and turns them invisible and stuff like that. And so him, since he died due to Hermes, he was invisible too. Stupid fight. I don't like it. Even though this has some really good story context for Hermes, I think it's a dumb fight. So Foo Fighters and Anastasia, and by the way, I'm gonna call him Anastasia. I think it's just a better name compared to Anasway. She recruits Anastasia from Emporio's room to help rescue Jolene, and he agrees. The only stipulation is that he wants Jolene and him to get married after he helps, because of her determination in her eyes to rescue her father, right? And Emporio's just like, this guy is weird, man. I don't know. I wouldn't trust him, but Foo Fighters is desperate, so she wants to help Jolene. So they go over to where Jolene is being held in solitary confinement. And this is where the survivor fight starts, where we have like four stand users in this one area, and then we have Jolene, and she has to fight all of them basically to get out because Poochie set it up so she wouldn't be able to escape. And the four stands are Planet Waves, Yo-Yo Ma, Survivor, and Enter the Dragon Stream. With the first one being Planet Wave with Guard Westwood, Jolene didn't have to fight, and his stand basically makes it so meteors fall down between the both of them, right? But he can't get hit by them. They always dissipate before they hit him, but they always hit Jolene. So after she beats him through ingenuity and quick thinking, we move on to Kenzo. So once she manages to beat Westwood, we go into Enter the Drake's Dream or Enter the Dragon's Dream, which this localization I think is a really good one. It still keeps that vibe of Enter the Dragon's Dream. And so the stand user Kenzo, he uses his stand by using feng shui, right? And it basically uses good luck and bad luck. And so Foo Fighters is the one fighting Kenzo right now. because Jolene is super injured after Westwood, and Anasway is there as well, but he's taking care of Jolene. And so for the next two episodes is Foo Fighters versus Kenzo, and she gets super injured, but they manage to beat him by having all three of them pool their intellect together to stop Kenzo. And so after they beat Kenzo, they find this new thing, the baby, right? The green baby. And so this green baby is very important to Poochie, so they tried to go find it because Jolene just has a hunch, right? And so Foo Fighters stays back to find the stand user. So after they beat Kenzo, Jolene and Anastasia leave to go find this green baby that Jolene's talking about, while Foo Fighters stays behind to find D and G, who's the stand user for Yo-Yo Ma. But then Father Poochie, aka White Snake, finds Foo Fighters and starts attacking her, right? And that fight right there with Foo Fighters is crazy. And so as we cut away to Jolene and Anastasia, we see Yo-Yo Ma there, right? And Anastasia, the way that he deals with them is just basically putting a frog into Yo-Yo Ma's mind, and now basically he's just done. Like that stand, we don't have to worry about him. So they're still chasing the green baby, and the green baby has a stand themselves. And basically, whoever gets close to the green baby shrinks. It's the same distance, it's just you're getting smaller. While Jolene and Anastasia are having to deal with that, Foo Fighters is dealing with Poochie over here after she tried to go and deal with D and G, right? And so Poochie, but because of weather, she manages to stay alive a little longer. So as Foo Fighters manages to get away because of weather, she goes to where Jolene and Anastasia are. And they're regrouping, they're talking and everything. And Anastasia's just like, yo, we need to kill this green baby. I don't care. Poochie cannot have this. And so while they're deliberating on that, the person that we thought was Weather, who came with Foo Fighters, was actually Poochie, because he impersonated him, right? And so to expand on this plot point, whether after Jolene and him fought Lang Wrangler, he was incapacitated. Like he had to go to the hospital for a couple of days, right? And so the weather that was with Foo Fighters couldn't have been him because he was still in the hospital. While he did manage to help Foo Fighters, that was the real one that helped her out. The one that was there was still Poochie. He'd never get out of his room. And so Poochie just basically fatally injures Anastasia. And now it's Jolene versus him, right? But Jolene has to let him get away because she's put into a situation where she has to choose between her friends or killing Poochie. And so she lets go of him and she goes to help them out, right? And Foo Fighters manages to keep Anastasia alive by sacrificing herself and all that because she's plankton so she can heal them, right? But that's all she could do. And so she passes away saying goodbye to Jolene because Jolene gave her life. She was the master that she needed. It wasn't White Snake and all that. So that's the end of Foo Fighters. Her reign in this story was short, but it was much appreciated. Foo Fighters have made the story better. And so one thing, the reason why Poochie's doing all this is because he actually knew Dio back before Jotaro fought him. And basically Dio was just like, yo, listen, to attain heaven, we have to do this, right? Like, this is true enlightenment. And because Poochie's a priest, this basically appealed to his mindset already. And so Poochie, ever since Dio died due to Jotaro's hands, has been trying to achieve heaven through Dio's means, right? With using the bone and using the green baby and all that. And so ever since he did that at the end of Foo Fighters and everything, he's basically on his way to attain heaven. He left the prison and now he's going to go to Orlando, to Cape Canaveral, to achieve his goal. And so this next fight is the last fight that we have in prison, right? Where it's Jolene and Emporio versus Mew Mew, aka Jailhouse Lock, right? And this fight is basically pretty dumb, to be honest. That you can only remember three things, and once you see a fourth thing, that first thing that you remembered is gone now. So it's just continuously cycling through memories, right? It's a dumb fight. I'll be honest, it's a really dumb fight. I don't want to go over it, which sucks because I like Mew Mew and I like her stand and everything, but it's a really bad fight to me. But then we move on because after Jolie manages to beat Mew Mew, her, Emporio, Hermes escape prison, and now they're trying to find Poochie. So then we cut away to Weather and Anastasia, and they break out of prison as well, and they're trying to find Jolene. And now it's just the prison stuff is over. We're not going back to Greed Dolphin Street Prison. Now we're in Orlando, and we're trying to find Poochie. So next, now that we're outside of prison, we have the fights against the three Dio children, right? And so the first one is Bohemian Rhapsody. And I really like Bohemian Rhapsody because of the context of it, right? You have all these crazy Disney characters, but for the anime, we have all these crazy Warner Brothers characters like Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, yeah, Batman. And it's just such a cool thing because this fight wouldn't be able to fly like, let's say, 10 years ago because it's just hard to get the rights for that. But because David Productions is owned by Warner Brothers, you still have that way to do this fight, right? I really enjoyed it, and just the fact that it's a weather and Anastasia centered fight as well, it really gave us time to get to know these two characters better. Because I really like these two characters. For the most part, I like all of the main cast in Part 6. I don't have any problems with them. But once they manage to beat Bohemian Rhapsody, we cut away to Jolene and Hermes who fight Sky High, right? Another one of the Dio children. Enriqueo, compared to the other two Dio children, honestly is probably the better one. He just got a unlucky lot in life, you know? And he's able to control weird cryptid creatures like rods. And I don't really understand the power fully even after having watched it, but Jolene, Hermes, and Emporio managed to fight him. I think this fight's alright, not my favorite fight, but it's definitely not the worst fight in part 6, so we just move on, right? This one only took an episode, so we go on to Underworld, right? And this fight I actually do remember from the manga, like really well. Jolene and Hermes go into a hospital while Emporio waits outside, right? Because he still has one of Jojo's memory discs, right? And he's supposed to give it to the Speedwagon Foundation so he can show up. So Hermes and Jolene follow Poochie into the hospital. So the last of the three Dio children has the underworld, and this scan basically makes it so he can use the memories of the ground to manifest it, right? So one of the memories was a plane crash that happened in Orlando in this area in 2005. And so Jolene and Hermes are trapped in that memory until it's over, and so they have to find ways to circumvent it and everything, right? They manage to get out of there and find the stand user, but Poochie manages to use this as a distraction to get out of here, right? And so he's gone from that area. When Versus gets out of the hole in the hospital, he tries to dig up the memories to find the disc because he wants to try to achieve heaven instead of Poochie, right? In doing so, he manages to give Weather his memories back because he's always had them missing. And this is where we learn everything. So Poochie and Weather are actually brothers, right? But they were separated from birth because a grieving mother, she lost her child in her arms. And so she took Weather from Poochie's family while nobody was looking and left the dead baby next to Poochie. So for 16 years they grew up separate, in the same town, funnily enough, but they grew up separately. And so Poochie became a priest at the age of like 16, 15 around there. And Weather works at a normal diner, right? And so while Weather's working there, he meets this girl, and she's actually Poochie's sister, which also is Weather's sister, if you really think about that, right? And so those two start dating, and Poochie's like, I can't stand this. Because while Poochie was working as a priest, he met the mother of Weather, and she told him the name of the person and everything, right? And she just revealed her sin in a confessionary. And Poochie, after learning all this, he hires a private investigator because he just doesn't want Weather to be with his sister. And so this private investigator, he goes to kill Weather because he finds out that he has some mixed blood in him. Because while Poochie's dark skinned as well, he paid, at the end of the day, he paid for it. But once the private investigator found out that this guy also has dark skinned blood in him, things got really bad because this private investigator is a part of the Ku Klux Klan and everything. So he lynched Weather. Poochie's sister, after being so grief stricken, decides to jump off the cliff near where Weather got hanged, and she drowned. But what she didn't know is that Weather lived. And with both of them being very emotional after the loss of a loved one, they go to fight in the middle of the town to go and kill each other. But Poochie pulls out Weather's memory so he doesn't remember, and he kept him in the prison ever since. And what I didn't mention about Poochie is that he actually planned all of this after he met Dio to have the prison and to have Jolene show up in there and to frame her. He planned all of that so that heaven could be attained. So he's kind of like the crazy ultra mastermind right now. But once we see all those memories, we see Weather get his memories back, and he starts off a little weird, to be honest. Like, I don't know. He really comes back and he's like a super big a-hole, but then he turns back into the normal Weather and he's like, yo, I have to kill Poochie. This man is a threat. We need to stop him. And so him and Anastasia go to fight Poochie, and it leads to heavy weather. Excuse me. And it leads to Weather unlocking his full stance where everybody's being turned into snails because of suggestive messaging, right? And so once they go find Poochie, Poochie blinded himself so he wouldn't be able to be turned into a snail. And it's just Anastasia and Weather versus Poochie right now. But Poochie manages to get the upper hand on both of them because Jolene, Emporio, Hermes, and Versus all show up in a car while they're being turned into snails. And this basically disrupts everything that was going on in that fight. It leads to Weather being killed by Poochie. But last second, Weather managed to take out his disc and he gave it to Emporio to keep it for safekeeping. And so now Weather is also gone. So all we have left is Jolene, Emporio, Hermes, and Anastasia. Those are the only four people that we have left. So all four of them are driving over to Cape Canaveral because Poochie's still on his way there, right? And what I find funny is that Emporio is the one driving, and granted, they're all convicted criminals except for him, so it makes sense for him too. It's just so funny. So on the way there, Anastasia is just his love for Jolene is growing even more, and so he tries to propose to her while she's sleeping near him. And Jolene wakes up because Hermes sees some crocodiles over there, and she remembers the crocodiles from in the Foo Fighters fight. She throws something at them, and it's the ring. And Anastasia is broken, literally distraught. It took so much money for him to get that ring, and all it was for was just to be thrown a stupid alligator, bro. That man was grief stricken. But next we show up, and here's one of my favorite fights in all of JoJo's Sea Moon. And this stand came about because Pale Snake and the Green Baby fused together to make Sea Moon. So when all of them show up to this facility, this NASA base, Hermes actually gets knocked out of the car because the gravity started working all the way back on the highway, right? So it's just those three that are left. Anastasia and Emporio try to help Jolene fight Sea Moon, but his stand ability is basically he can invert anything, right? So let's say he punches your hand, he can invert it so the flesh is inside out. And so Jolene, the way that she finds a way to circumvent this is by using a Mobius strip or the sign of infinity, because you can't invert something that's infinite, that's impossible. And so once Poochie realizes that Sea Moon is struggling, he comes out of hiding to fight Jolene himself. So now it's Sea Moon and Poochie fighting as well. Them two fighting, it was so fire. And then Jotaro manages to show up as soon as Poochie's about to kill Jolene with a gun. So the reason he was able to show up was because after they brought the disc over from Emporio, they put him into him, and he just immediately went over to Cape Canaveral because of the Joestar star, he can track him just like how Jolene can do it. So they brought Hermes after they fell out the car as well, and that's why those two are there. I didn't mention it. So he shows up and he's taking care of Poochie, but Poochie last second uses the gravity from Sea Moon to get closer to the sky so that the new moon doesn't need to be here. He has to get up into the atmosphere at a certain range to basically make it so it's a new moon in the sky, right? And so he gets there and he manages to achieve it, and then everything blacks out, right? And so all five of them wake up and they're all there, they're chilling. But you notice that the sky is moving really fast, right? And so what we learn is that everything is just speeding up, right? And that's because of Made in Heaven, Poochie's new stand ability, right? He can just speed up anything. This is the final boss of part 6. And so once everybody finds that out, they get together and they try to beat Poochie. And so Jotaro is the key to this by using the world, right? Star Platinum the world. But because Poochie is too strong, Jotaro can't beat him. He's too fast. It's hard to tell where he's going to be, right? And because of that, Anastasia uses Diver Down, which, by the way, I don't think I've mentioned Diver Down at all in this video. That's his stand, by the way. He can basically put his stand into anybody, any person, do anything, right? It's kind of like a ghost in a sense. And so Anastasia comes up with a plan basically to deal with Poochie. So they send themselves to the ocean near the NASA base, and now they're just stuck there because you can see Poochie running on the water. So the plan is basically lure him in so that Jotaro can stop time and deal with him, right, and cook him. So Anastasia's gonna be the bait. But because Poochie's smart, and honestly most stand users are, Poochie planned for this. And so when Jotaro stopped time, he threw knives at Jolene the same way that Jotaro was fighting Dio and Dio threw knives at him. And so Jotaro takes the knives for Jolene so that she doesn't get hurt. And so once time resumes, Anastasia's dying, Jotaro's dying, and Hermes gets hit. So Jolene takes the time while everything's going on to find a dolphin, put Emporio on it, and then zoom, right? Just zoom away from Poochie. And so she's attached to the dolphin still, and the dolphins are naturally faster than Poochie. Because you also gotta remember, while Poochie is speeding up time for himself, that doesn't mean that he's not human. He's not like Barry Allen where he can just run forever. He's still a normal priest. And so Jolene lets go with a dolphin, basically saying goodbye to Emporio, like, because everybody else is dead. Jotaro is dead, Anastasia's dead, and so is Hermes. And Jolene's on the verge of dying, right? So she lets go. She goes to fight Poochie, and it leads to her death as well. And so now Emporio's the only one left in the Part 6 crew. And so once everything is done with that, the universe restarts because it's sped up too fast. And so now we're in another timeline where we're in Green Dolphin Street Prison, but Pucci put it to this time period specifically so he can kill Emporio because he's the last one remaining from the other timeline. And so they're chasing him around and he goes into his room. But because Emporio still has Weather Stand, he uses it because no matter how fast he is, they're still stuck in this room together and he can't escape it. And on top of that, Weather Stand is a stronger stand than Pucci in terms of like strength type. So once Pucci is crippled from the oxygen seeping into him, he can't activate Made in Heaven. So Emporio wins. Emporio manages to beat Pucci because even though he restarted the universe, his goal was basically to make it so people knew how they were going to die, right? So they could repent and live in ways knowing that, like, yeah, this is going to be my last day, but at least I'll know when it is, you know? But because Pucci didn't, excuse me, but because Pucci didn't go all the way to Cape Canaveral in this timeline, he's not gonna be able to finish it. He said it himself. He needs to be there. And the time that they went back to when Jolene was visited by her dad, right? But because this is a different timeline, this isn't the same Jolene, and this isn't the same Jotaro either. So once Emporio beats Pucci, the timeline is reset again, right? And now I don't know if this is like the current day, like if it's March 2012, because that's when Jolene got out of prison, or if it's still like 2011. Emporio's waiting at a gas station and he sees Hermes get out of a bus, right? And she asks him for a change, right? Change for 50. But he doesn't have any money and he's just so confused as to how she's alive right now, right? And she looks different. It's not the exact Hermes and she has a different name too. But then she misses her bus because the guy didn't wait for her, right? And so now she's stuck here and she's like, dang, man, like, thanks a lot, I guess. And so she's about to get ready to leave, but then Anastasia, he's there as well, but he looks a little different, right? And then another person's there, and it's Jolene, or at the very least, this version's Jolene. Her name is Irene, and so Irene basically invites Emporio into the car, as well, excuse me, as well as Hermes, and now they're all there in the car together, and they're going to see Jotaro, and they pick up weather as well on the side of the road. And that's the end of part six because Emporio's crying the whole time because he misses them so much. These people were literally his family. And so the fact that he's able to see them again, at least in some capacity, just means the world to him. And so now we're in the new JoJo's timeline. And this is where part 7 and part 8 continue. And let me tell you, I cannot wait. Oh my gosh. And so to give my thoughts on everything that I just talked about, I love these characters. I love the story, I love the villain, and I love the events, the setting, everything. This story was awesome. Is it my favorite JoJo's part? No, but after having gone through it again, it might be top 2, maybe top 3, you know, for sure. And for every Limp Bizkit and Jailhouse Lock, there's always going to be a Manhattan Transfer, a Bohemian Rhapsody, a Sea Moon, a Made in Heaven. There's just so many good fights in this part that heavily outweigh the bad ones. I really want to know, for people that don't like this part, why don't you like it, right? Is it a fight? Is it the characters? Let me know down below, because I know that the manga was a little different because I read it and everything, and that I know the characters were adjusted to be better for the modern audience in 2023 instead of back when this was made, like, I think like 2001 or somewhere around then. But overall, this part is great. With Jotaro, I know that there's a sentiment of like, I wish Jotaro could have done something more. But for me, after having rewatched this and seen this, Jotaro couldn't have done much. Pucci's just cheese, bro. Made in Heaven is hard to beat. Even with a power like Stop Time, it's just so hard to beat. And on top of that, Pucci was outsmarting everybody. It was toxic. There's so much I want to say about it, but I'm going to cut this video here because it took so long to make this video, even though it was a mix of laziness, but also I've been busy. So it's been harder to make videos. And on top of that, watching the show. So I'm sorry about that. I hope I can get videos out to you guys sooner. It's not going to be, again, a daily format, but it's going to be the way that I can. At least I can make them. But thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all enjoy. And I'll see you all in the next video. Still going to be some JoJo's. I have one more thing to watch from it. And then after that, it's whatever comes next, you know? So I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.